Being in a tech ecosystem, we don't have a lot of women. For me to be here is proof that women can do it, women can be leaders, and I hope to inspire other women, especially young African women, to be bold and courageous, follow their passions, and when they're offered that seat at the table, to take it and take the front seat at changing the African narrative.
Since I joined Impact Africa Network, my thinking has really been expanded. I now for sure believe that if I put my mind and time into something, I can bring life-changing ideas into fruition.
The culture at IAN encourages continual learning. This makes someone to source for outlets for learning, opportunities for growth in order to continually ensure that they do the best at their job. Also working with Mark, who has this great vision for changing the African narrative. He wants to take us on that journey with him, pushes you to the limit, pushes you to want to be better.
My thinking has changed from looking for problems to being a solution provider. That way, I will stop worrying and actually do something.
I really enjoy being a leader and at the same time being a student. At Impact Africa Network, there's a lot of continuous learning and development. So it gives you this hunger for knowledge. It pushes you to be the best possible version of yourself, because you cannot change the African narrative being anything less.
At Impact Africa Network, we bet on the women. We believe women are much more effective at leading and nurturing complex people-centric systems, and startups are the quintessential people-centric systems of our day.
As the Women of Impact Africa Network, we will be hosting a live cast series with global female leaders and change makers, having conversations with the intent of inspiring a new generation of female leaders just like ourselves. If you or someone you know should be part of this conversation, we would love to host you. Talk to us.
You can also be a change maker by helping us create more leadership opportunities for women by donating today. IAN is a registered U.S. nonprofit charitable entity under Section 501c3.
Happy New Year to all our viewers. Happy 2021. We're glad that we got to see this year. We're glad that we went through 2020, and in our case, 9 episodes down, different women from different parts of the world with a lot of experience to bring to the table. And we are back. We're back with the first episode of the year, which we're really excited to have on a different day, on a Monday. So I hope you enjoy the change in time. And this is a live cast series brought to you by Impact Africa Network, where we have conversations with global female business leaders and change makers. They share their story with the intent of inspiring a new generation of female leaders in Africa. And Impact Africa, we are a nonprofit startup studio in Nairobi on a mission to ensure that young, talented Africans participate in the digital transformation of Africa as creators and owners. Today, we are going to be joined by someone from Accenture with a lot of experience in supporting businesses, and we're going to learn a lot about how to support entrepreneurship. And as usual, I'm going to be joined by my colleague, Joy, welcome, Joy, who is going to go ahead and introduce our guest today.
Happy New Year, everyone. It's great to be back. Like my colleague said, last year was insightful. It was exciting. We learned quite a lot during that period, and we hope this year will even be bigger and better, and that we will all learn together. So today we are joined by a phenomenal lady. Her name is Kathryn Ross. Sometimes she likes to be called Kathy. Kathy has enjoyed a long career with Accenture, where she has a wealth of experience focusing on emerging and disrupting technologies and helping industry-leading clients just prepare for combat, understand how these new functions and capabilities of technology in their businesses. She's very passionate about working with cutting-edge technologies, and she has translated that over the years into delivering innovation solutions in a variety of industries, including financial, retail, and public service. She has also been in board service in different organizations, and she has a Bachelor of Science in Engineering from the University of Florida. Welcome, Kathryn. Thank you so much for making time.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. I know I have introduced you, but please just tell our audience a little bit more about yourself, maybe, less serious than my introduction.
No, absolutely. And I think Phyllis actually said it in the video. When I graduated with an engineering degree, I actually didn't know what it is that I wanted to do. I was, thinking about a variety of different career choices. The top of them at the time, because it was in biomedical engineering that I graduated, was something to do with genetics and DNA. And I happened to decide, I wanted to take a year or two out to get some work experience, a real work experience that was not an internship. And the first company in line happened to be at the time Anderson Consulting, which became Accenture. And I took that 1 year and I stayed for the next 26. So, and the reason why is because, number one, technology is fascinating. It changes so quickly and so rapidly. It's such an integral part of what we all do, both personally and professionally, with our clients, our corporate clients. And it's given me at least a platform in which I've had the opportunity to learn and grow and really problem solve for myself and my clients.
That's really great, Kathryn. So 27 years at Accenture, you've almost, I don't know if you've mastered the art of supporting businesses or entrepreneurship, whether that happens. But I think one of the questions that would be amazing, because today we want to learn about how to support entrepreneurship, is in all those years that you've done this, especially when trying to help businesses adapt technologically, what are some of the surprises that you have seen in your work? Some of that have stood out for you?
Stood out. So I will say this. So 27 years been in technology. Today, what I do is I work with startups. I figure out and identify startups in the ecosystem and how their innovations and their technology can help change the game for our clients. And whether that's from a competitive perspective, whether that's expansion of their product line, et cetera. So I don't know that you can ever master that, because the technology changes, the clients change, the challenges change, the questions change too much. So it's kept me on my toes. In terms of what's so surprised me, we talk about 2020. And I think that for the years to come, we'll probably continue to talk about 2020 as such a pivotal year for a variety of different reasons. But from a technological perspective, what we saw was all of the inertia of the previous years, people moving to cloud computing, brick and mortar stores, and the advent of things like 5G and others. It literally was the perfect storm of all of these things coming together and rapidly needing people to change, right? Companies to change because a pandemic. The expectation was now that you needed to be able to operate online, you needed to be able to operate remotely, so that you could still operate. We see, so all of those technologies, if you will, whether it's the ecosystem or even standard technologies that, have been in the marketplace for years, we saw a rapid movement towards how do we use those better, faster, cheaper in the marketplace. And I think for me, if there is, year over year, I could probably point to something that was interesting or surprising, but the lessons, I guess, learned in this past year are probably first and foremost for me. I just did sort of a reflection on 2020 about a week ago. And it truly is, with everything else that's sort of happening in the marketplace right now, something that's been, exciting is probably the wrong word. It's really world changing, if you will, in terms of what it's doing in the marketplace. So, if I pointed to something that was surprising, it'd probably be that. No, it was unexpected. No one could foresee it coming. It just, all those things sort of came together. And now I think even in 2021 and 2022, we'll see technology continue to push to the forefront.
Great. I think that's a great answer. And I like that you mentioned about being adaptive, especially in such a fast changing world, and also tech in itself is also fast changing. And I'm just curious about what have you seen with businesses that choose to be adaptive and businesses that choose not to be adaptive? What have you observed from those two kind of scenarios?
I mean, it's law of Darwinism, adapt or die. You sort of have to, right? Either you'll get acquired or you won't be relevant anymore. I don't think, in this past year, we saw many organizations that, everyone had to adapt. Restaurants had to adapt. brick and mortar stores that, sold goods needed to be able to deliver, because otherwise they wouldn't be selling goods because people weren't walking in there. We're going to see entertainment start to adapt, because, if I look at the States, I look in Europe, no one's going to movie theaters right now, right? And so, the movie business, the entertainment business, you've got your sports, all of those things are adapting, right? And they had to, it took a bit, but I think the reality is, in order to grow, you do need to. And a lot of people are asking the question, all right, or saying when the pandemic is over, we'll go back. And, I don't know that I don't think we will go back. I'll just say that. I think there are things that were available to us in the past that we will miss, and that we want to have come back. And I think we'll figure out ways for that to happen. But I think this new world is also offering us new ideas, new conveniences, new things that we didn't think about because it wasn't necessary for it to happen. And I think that's also going to, from an innovation standpoint, push us to what's new. And once again, if you're in technology or you're in innovation, computer science, math, any of those things, those are all, part of creating what that new is going to look like.
Adapt or die, that's true. I want to move you towards a topic that's became quite heated or quite open. It was always there, especially in the US, and this is diversity and inclusion and different groups. But at this time, I'll start with Black people. And Accenture started a program called Accenture Black Founders Development Program.
Yes.
Please educate us a bit more about that program.
So as I said, my primary job today is to work with startups, identifying, fantastic technologies in the ecosystem to bring to our clients. One of the other things I've always been passionate about, throughout my 20+ year career is inclusion and diversity. Obviously, I'm a Black woman. I'm in technology in a field that's not predominantly either Black people and or women. And so, my goal, my passion has been always, how do I bring and encourage more women of color to come into this field? Because once again, I think there's huge opportunities for us to learn and grow. So part of my role, when I took it on, was to create an agenda for Accenture Ventures. And, started down that path in December of last year, before COVID, before, anything happened here in the States with, Black Lives Matters and things like that. And, the research basically came back and said, hundreds of billions of dollars are flowing to startups in the ecosystem. Less than 1% is going to Black founders, right? Put aside COVID and everything else, that's a staggering number to me. And that's, I'm like, there's fantastic technology in any community. And there's fantastic technology that's necessary with diversity to actually flourish and become something that's real in the environment and differentiating. And so that's what started me down this path of creating the Black Founders Program. And then, of course, the events happened this summer with George Floyd and others, and that really just spurred me on to say, no, this is the right thing, the right time. And, to be honest, I just said, hey, I'm going to be less politically correct. And it's not just around creating a program for all underrepresented communities, although they all have, less than stellar numbers in terms of VC dollars. But truly, let's look at the ones that are struggling the most, and it's the Black founders at less than 1%. And so I think the opportunity here truly is to start looking at how do we elevate these communities, because the issue is access, right? It's access to funding, but it's also access to knowledge capital. And it's the knowledge capital of resources around, how valuable is your technology? Is it too limited? Do you need to expand it to have it, have more capabilities, if you will, in the marketplace? All those kinds of questions are things that our Black founders are dying to have access to, but because, for a variety of different reasons, whether they're on the coast, whether they have the actual connections and contacts they need to ask these questions and to get in front of, whether it's VCs or angel investors or otherwise, that's something that needs to change. And in my role, Accenture is 500,000 people globally. I mean, it's still, I started, it was 30,000. Now it's 500,000 people globally. And that's a lot. That's a big network in and of itself. I always say we're a small country. And then each of us have our own networks, whether it's clients, organizations, or otherwise. if there's an opportunity for us to bring a founder in, and that's the ultimate of the program. Yes, I'm a VC, or Accenture Ventures is a VC, and we are looking as an organization to invest in founders. But even more so than that, it's not just about the dollar investment. It's when we do find founders, how do we help them get the next 2 or 3 steps ahead that's more than just the dollars? And whether that's introductions to clients so that they can, take a look and provide constructive feedback on the idea. If it's introduction to additional engineers, or a tangential field to see if there's a connection there that could expand the idea beyond the initial idea. That's, I think, the opportunity, because I think once that community starts to be built, if you have access to a place where, we sort of have this idea in our head that in Silicon Valley, if you go into a Starbucks, you probably trip over probably 5 or 6 startup entrepreneurs, right? And they're all talking and chatting. It's not necessarily true, but, and that's how an idea evolves, because they've got that community there of people who are like-minded and they can riff off of each other to develop ideas. How do we create that virtual community for the Black entrepreneurs such that they still have that same access? And that's how Black Founders got started.
Great. Yes, Jay, you can go ahead.
All right, I still on diversity before we move on. Accenture also did another study that shows that 50% of women who take up tech roles drop them by the age of 35, which is very, I don't want to call it tragic, but what's your advice on how we can attract and actually keep women in tech for a long time?
So I think that there's a couple things, right? When people join companies, and I've spent 27 years at Accenture, so I can't necessarily speak for other companies. Although as a systems integrator, I've worked in quite a few of those, and I've seen similar, similar sort of tracks. But their expectation is, and it's the right expectation is, you as the individual need to manage your career, right? So you need to make sure that you're speaking up. You need to make sure that you're asking for opportunities and moving that forward. And women do it in a different way than men. And so when you put that into a situation in which it's a male-predominated environment, there's a disconnect potentially in the language, if you will, that's being spoken, and how people are perceived, if you will, in terms of asking for what they want, when they're male versus female. So, I think that we've made tremendous strides in the last couple of years, but organizations need to put things in place that enable women to be able to actively operate, right? And it's almost like, hey, it's not that, we're putting in things that only benefit women, it benefits both. And whether that's parental programs, whether that's mentorship and sponsorship specifically, because once again, right, and I go back to Black Founders as well, I'm focused on that because that's where the change needs to happen. So I'm not focused on the greater community. I know the greater community, underrepresented founders, needs just as much help. And my goal is I make it successful once and then I expand it out. So I think it's the same thing for women, right? They've made tremendous strides. Of all of the underrepresented communities, probably more or faster, if you will, than the others. But there still needs to be programs put in place because that diversity of thought is absolutely necessary in the C-suite. It's necessary at the board table. It's necessary at the investment table. It's necessary for education, healthcare, and everything else, because guess what? We're different. We're different than men. And if you don't hear those voices, then guess what? You have products that only see some small portion of the community, or innovations that aren't as big as they could have been if you had that thought in that. But companies, organizations absolutely have to put things that depend. I mean, we know there's a pay gap. There is a pay gap between males and females. All right, well, what's my incentive if I'm doing the same work, but you're going to pay me less, right? And I'm going to be stellar for you as an employee, but you're going to pay me less, right? That's not an incentive. So our structures need to change to make sure that we are incentivizing women to stay. Because if they have other opportunities, then they're going to take them. Now, we say 30 at 35. Let's be clear, a lot of those women are actually leaving to start their own companies, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but we do want them to stay in corporate America as well. but many are not. Many are moving because they've been disenfranchised within their own organizations.
And that's a very sad note to end at, to hear that they've been disenfranchised. That should change. But also, I want to really emphasize on a point you've spoken about, or the structure of how you've structured the Accenture Black Founders Development Program, because it really speaks to even how we do our things and how we look at the work that we do, because we believe not aggregating resources, both financially and people, goes a long way. And that's how we do it. That's why we have you here as well, so that you can help other people, in this case women, but every other person can learn something from you today. So we also have a setting where we have a mentor network where people who have experience can mentor some of the fellows in our studio while they build startups, while they build projects that are going to create an impact in the society. One of the other things that you also pointed out is the growth from 30,000 people to 500,000. That's a big thing.
That's a big.
And I'm not sure. I'm looking at Africa and I'm asking myself, what's the plan? What's the plan? What is Accenture's plan for Africa? In the recent years, we've seen, at least in Kenya, Nigeria has probably had more exits, but in Kenya, we've seen 2 exits, which is a big deal. But unfortunately, they're not by founders that look like me or were born here. They founded those things here, and they've been able to grow to that extent. So we're looking at people like Accenture. I mean, companies like Accenture. What is the plan? What's the go ahead when you look at Africa?
So I wouldn't. So I can't speak for the greater Accenture. that's not my role or job. But what I will say is this: I'm not country focused. I'm idea focused. I'm innovation focused, and I truly don't care where it comes from. We are, ultimately searching for the question. I think somebody, once again, I think Phyllis, that you'd mentioned in the video that being a problem solver, right? And you're looking for the problems to solve. I'm actually going beyond that. I'm saying I'm looking for the questions where I'm looking for the next question, if you will, that we should be answering, which is going to lead to the next problem that we need to solve. So a great example would be the labor shifts that we saw as a result of COVID, right? The problem is, in many cases, we have companies that are trying to, figure out how do they operate in a new environment with the number of people that they have. Do they lead them off, lay them off? Are they going to upskill them? What do they need to do? As other companies move to the cloud, how do they reskill their people, right? So there are different problems in there, but the question really is the one that we should be looking at, which is the labor market is shifting. And as the labor market shifts, there are going to be a slew of opportunities, challenges that we need to sort of go through and look for. So that's what I'm looking at, right? What are the major market questions that are out there? COVID, once again, digital healthcare has also, of course, risen up, if you will, in the ecosystem, something that needs to be solved. So I'm looking for solutions in the marketplace that address, maybe it's the supply chain for COVID, maybe it's, hey, we need to be able to do something different in this country versus others because of refrigeration issues, or right. But it's the question that I'm looking at. And if you've got an innovation, a solution, a startup that's starting to address some of those questions, where you come from, I'm not necessarily, I don't have a plan, if you will, to say I'm going to go into this country. I'm looking for the best investable solutions, or solutions that we can help build to become those investable solutions. So data is huge. Access to data is huge. And I think Africa is one of those places, one of the untapped places, if you will, from a data perspective, from a financial services perspective, banking. That's also, of course, payments and things like that is something that is not, I wouldn't say necessarily a challenge, but I really call it an opportunity, because Africa is very, very different from the rest of the world in this capacity. And from a size perspective, once again, you said the 30,000 to 500,000, it's also a big space, right? It's a market in and of itself that almost doesn't need to go anyplace else. You can sort of create your own. So I think that's where I would, fundamentally for this audience say, well, what's the problem that your innovation is solving, right? What's differentiated about your solution? Why is it different? Why is it interesting? If you can answer that question, then now you've got something. Now you have something to test, right, against the marketplace. And guess what? I'm happy to, for folks to reach out to us to test. And, our goal is to be constructive. And in some cases, it could be, it's a little too niche. You need to expand it. You need to have it grow. But once again, it may just need to grow for Africa, not necessarily for every other country in the world.
Oh, wow, indeed, Kathryn. And I like that you mentioned that Accenture is innovation focused. And when you said that, I was buzzing with excitement because I'm like, then you're looking at the right people for that, because at Impact Africa Network, we have a startup studio, and it's interesting that we are working on projects on the same spaces that you're from mentioning, fintech, data, and so on and so forth. And I also like that you invited us to also, seek your opinion in some of these projects that you're working on. So I'm sure we will be reaching out to you if you want to test our
Absolutely.
product and such. And speaking of this, and having worked with entrepreneurs over the years, I'm curious to know, in your experience, what is the mindset or culture required for entrepreneurial success, especially now that it's a fast changing world?
First and foremost, I'm going to say on both sides, it's knowledge, right? What I've found in many cases is entrepreneurs, they have a fantastic idea and they're going to go speak to whoever, VC, an angel investor, a grant, and they're doing all the research for, what is it, what's available to me in terms of the economics, et cetera, but maybe don't do the knowledge, the education necessary to understand the flip side. What is that VC? What is that entrepreneur, that angel investor, that grant? What are they looking for, right? And making sure that you are prepared. I sort of call it, sometimes they're going in to play basketball and the other team is playing tennis, right? So they're preparing for different sports, and then sometimes you get into the conversation and you are on different playing fields, and that's, I think, the opportunity for entrepreneurs is make sure that you understand where you're going, right? Another one of the things that we are trying to do from an ecosystem, a community aspect, is to create a group of people, whether they are entrepreneurs who've started multiple companies, who are able to provide that feedback to say, hey, right, this is what this means, because the information's out there. It's just disparate and it's all over, and you have to understand it and you have to dig into it. And sometimes that's very difficult to do when at the same time you're actually trying to, start your company and truly grow that, if you will, to where you want it to go, right? It's part of it, and you've got to find the time necessary to be able to do that. But I think fundamentally that's at the root of things, is making sure that when you do go into these meetings, or as you start to move forward from a career perspective, you understand who's on the other side of that table for whatever reason, and that you also have your game plan going in. I've had or heard, quite a few stories where, there were Black entrepreneurs, who got funded, and, based on how they did the boards and things like that, and because of a lack of knowledge, they ended up signing over a little bit more money than they wanted to, right? Those are the kinds of things that we don't want to have happen, right? That's the bad side of the story. You got funded, but you didn't get all the money you wanted to, and it wasn't the best deal. So how do we create an environment such that we can truly create wealth in the Black community, to create knowledge in the Black community? Because if we can do that and you start businesses, that creates jobs, that creates healthcare, that creates all these other things. And so how do we make sure that we're truly doing this? I don't want to say altruistically, because there is altruism in it, but there is money to be made on all sides, and it doesn't have to be us versus them. It's us together.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. Before I go on to the next question, I'd like to remind our audience that you can engage with us, or you can ask Kathryn a question through our social media pages. This is YouTube and using the hashtags Power to Our Women, YouTube and Twitter, most especially. And we'll get to it. I think I want to go back to what you spoke about when you were dealing with the question how Accenture is involved in Africa. And one of the main challenges we have is that it's true people can reach out to you, but people don't know who to reach out to, especially when they're this far away from you. Like you're probably in a different market, you live that far, Accenture is located that far. But when people are not here, they're not able to understand the real problems and that lack of face-to-face conversations. And I'm not even sure whether it's a question or it's a challenge, because I find that when people are far, they don't really get what the actual needs are. Of course, we need the money, we need the capital, but we need some type of capital that is patient, because our market is still developing, especially in the VC sector. We are still young for that. Some people have had, but very many young innovators cannot access that. And it's not even a question, it's just a challenge. It's something that Accenture can think about, how best to assist, especially this market, because it's different. It's completely different from the rest of the markets. Very young, but with a lot of potential. We are the youngest continent in Africa, and a lot of people are coming up with different innovations. Pretty much that's what I would like to. I don't know if you have something to say to that, to speak to that.
I don't know that once again, as I said, I'm someone who's in the trenches, wants to be in the trenches with everyone to figure out the answers. I am certainly not saying that I have the answer or the solution. I think Africa is a very, very interesting place because, as you said, their challenges are different. I can't go to China and say that they have, the same challenge. They have a different set of challenges and a different set of opportunities. So, I think it's, once again, it's understanding, because I visited once, but I cannot say that I'm an expert at it. So I truly would need to sit down with a group of folks within Africa to understand, well, what is the major challenge, right? As you said, it's not just necessarily, access to investment. It's sort of more than that. I would say this, though, if you can articulate the size of the problem, right? Whether it's in dollars, whether it's in productivity, you pick your measure, but can sort of articulate the size of the problem, then you've sort of articulated the size of an opportunity. And that's, I think, and what needs to change. And is it just behavior changes? Is it technology changes? Is it business changes? That suddenly starts to create sort of a dialogue, right? Where now you can understand. So as I said, if I go back to what we were looking at the questions. I'm talking about labor market shifts. A labor market shift in North America is going to be very different than a labor market shift in Africa. But we know that because of COVID, right, and how it's impacting people and what's happening with companies moving to cloud, that movement of people in and out of companies, up in companies, et cetera, is changing. So what is that change for Africa? That's a fantastic conversation to have. And it may not be COVID related. It could be cloud related. It could be 5G related. It could be something else completely. But we know that it's happening in a bunch of different places. Healthcare, same thing. How is Africa different? What's the opportunity? It may not be the opportunity that's in other places, but there probably is one. You guys could probably tell me and say, you know what, Kathy, the biggest thing for us right now is data, right? Here's why. Now we're starting to have a dialogue. Right, that's the kind of interaction that I want and need, because then I can start doing research. Then we can start looking back and saying, well, okay, is this big enough? And if not, let's have a dialogue on how we make it big enough.
Okay, great. I mean, we can have that backstage.
Okay.
Yes, Joy, go ahead.
Yes, I think I would love to continue having this conversation, because like she's talking and I'm like, I already have the answers. Like we're big on tech, fintech especially. We are developing in data science, and basically Africa is buzzing with innovation and great ideas. So the problem is not the innovations. I think for us, what would be our biggest support is actually funding, and how we get that funding, because like Phyllis has mentioned, most of our startups are not ready for like seed capital or venture capital, so to speak. But how do we support these young people to nurture these ideas without like having to worry about, how do I pay rent, how do I make food for dinner today. So I think that
I'm
also
that's actually not different in the States than it is in Africa.
absolutely.
Unfortunately, that's exactly where that 1% number comes from. Is we have a lot of people of color, Black people here as well, where that first set of money before you get to seed, which is supposed to be, friends and family. Well, guess what? Our friends and family can't afford, right, to invest this, and we can't afford to leave our jobs, right, to go start these businesses, and so it creates that dynamic. But you're absolutely correct. That is something that we are looking at, and some of the things, just so you know, that we've been talking about is, is there an incentive, if you will, if we have an opportunity to introduce people to the downstream market where they would ultimately sell their product to, introduce them to those clients, for those clients to give them constructive feedback, but to determine, is there something real to their idea, right? Now, if there's something real to their idea, they can sort of get that certification, so to speak. Does that now spur investment dollars that may have not come until you got to seed rounds? May that spur, an impact on that in entrepreneurs' part to, okay, now I know that there's something there. I know that there's somebody who's interested. Let me sort of push this forward. Even more so, maybe it stirs that downstream potential client invests. So there's opportunities here. Once again, I think Phil said, I don't necessarily have the answer. What I do know is there's a slew of people who are raising their hands with funds willing to help. How do we bring them together to change? Right? Because they're looking for opportunities to use that money to change the game. And some of it may be in pre-seed type dollars.
Exactly. And that's actually, I think that's what I've been driving at. How do we take them to see like the people who are doing things on the ground? How do we connect that? That's right. Part of the reason why we exist at Impact Africa Network, to connect them to young talent. I know we're 38 minutes in and we're about to jump into quick fire, but I've actually received a question on my WhatsApp, and someone in the audience wants to know, Janet Daly wants to know, what are some of the challenges you've experienced as a woman in the tech space?
You name it. Yeah. I mean, you tell me. It's so I will say I've been doing it for 26 years, and I started as a coder, right? So I was writing code my first probably 2 or 3 years within this industry. So I built myself from the bottom up. I made sure that I understood what happens underneath the covers foundationally for technology. Then I moved into design and things like that. Then I moved into sales. So the challenges have been, I've been taken to be someone's secretary. Getting my voice heard in a room was difficult at sometimes. And I'm not shy, nor am I quiet. But sometimes, I had the situation where people would speak over you, or they would say something and, or I would say something and it was ignored, and somebody else would say it, and it sort of moved forward. So you name it, over the course of those 26 years, I think I've seen, sort of different dynamics. Ultimately, now I've seen shifts, right? We've seen the market move forward as fast as I wanted to. No, but there are, I think, huge opportunities now where women specifically and women of color are truly being encouraged to move into these senior level positions in fields. Even more so today, this past summer, if there's a positive to be taken out of the Black Lives Matter movement, it's the people who are being moved into positions of power. And when you can see someone in that role, right, now there's an opportunity to say, okay, there's a path that I can forge to get there. So it's like, you name it, I've probably experienced it at one time or another.
We have another question from the audience. Evelyn asks, what do you consider to be your biggest achievement this far in your career?
Ooh, this fund is my biggest achievement. If you think about it, right? If you are growing in yourself in your career, the next thing you do, or the thing you're currently doing, is your next big achievement. I just started and got this fund approved within Accenture. And once again, think about a 500,000 person company. Transparently, we are, even as a tech company, still looking for the answers to make sure that our leadership, our executives within our company is representative and diverse as well, right? You can see that on our website. Our CEO speaks about that consistently. And I'm actually very, very proud of all the things that our company has done over the years to get us to where we are. Why I'm proudest about Black founders is, when this program started to be put in place, my leadership was on board from the very beginning. They were, don't be afraid to be controversial. We are behind you 100%. How can we help you drive this forward? How can we help bring clients along? And truly, right, and I say this to people, this isn't about marketing, right? I am not looking to get my name in the newspaper or things like that. I am truly looking for Black founders who I can make a difference with, because this is my community. I have 2 boys, 13 and 11, hopefully in school right now remotely, but hopefully in school, who one day I hope are entrepreneurs. And I want them to have access to capital. I want them to be able to take their ideas forward. Their father's an entrepreneur, so they're all thinking up ideas. So the question is, how do I truly create an environment, because I have the opportunity, I have a platform to do it, and I have leadership support, where I can actually make that change and make that change impactful and drive it into the community.
That's a very good answer and very personal as well, considering you've referenced your sons as well. One of our innovation fellows actually has a very good question, and she asks, as an upcoming, she's one of the people working on different projects that will spin out as startups. She asks, what key activities would you recommend that her and her colleagues invest time in this stage of their careers, where they're building ideas?
Where they're building ideas. You know what? It really, I don't care what career you're in, you can be an entrepreneur, you can be in corporate America. It's all about your network. Expand your network to people that, you know what, it may not even seem like it's relevant. It's all relevant, right? From a personal perspective, coming up in my career, as I said, I was a coder, I was a designer. I was one of those people who I was very happy to be behind the scenes, behind a computer, quietly coding, myself, putting out great work. But that's sort of like a tree falling in the forest. Does anybody hear it, right? You need people to hear it. You need people to hear you, to see you. So that is probably one of the biggest things that I always tell people is use any opportunity you have to meet new people, to share your idea with them, to get feedback, good, bad, ugly. It's just to sort of get to know people, not at a surface level, but to actually figure out, right? I mean, it's like part of the job, if you will, from an entrepreneurial perspective, to create that thought process and a community around you that can help shape and evolve your idea. So that could mean, you know what? You reach out randomly and you speak to a marketing person. It has nothing to do, but just chatting with them. It may be something tangential. Once again, as I said, inclusion and diversity is something that's near and dear to my heart. If you put that with, side by side with labor market shifts, right? All right, we're now talking about labor market shifts and how does that impact an underrepresented community? And are there technologies that we should be putting in place that think about bias right? So that's where I'm saying the network becomes so critical for you that you should actually when you're creating your idea, create what's my network plan? Who are the absolute people I need to talk to? Who are the random people that I need to talk to? And then who are the off the wall, right? No connection at all, but I just want to get some, various outside input, if you will, into the idea. And you just never know what can happen.
Thank you, Kathryn. You've spoken to a point that a lot of the ladies and the leaders who have been coming to this show keep on reiterating about networking. Yes, and I can't wait to see Christine implement that. Now we've run out of time, and unfortunately, this is coming to an end. So I'm going to ask the last question, which I usually ask all the female leaders that come to the show. Kathryn, you've had a very great career, and I would like to. Yeah, it does look rosy from out here, though.
Yes, it does. It does.
Yes. So one of the questions usually asked the ladies is, what is the challenge you're leaving for the next generation of female leaders behind you? That could be me, Phyllis, or even the innovation fellows, the likes of Christine and her colleagues. What's the next thing for them?
The next thing, you know what? The thing for me that has been probably the most important from a career perspective is stewardship, right? And it's leaving the place better for the generation behind you, giving them something good to grab a hold of that they can take forward and make bigger and better or different. That's, I think, the challenge, if you will, for the next generation of women. If you look at previous generations, I wouldn't be here without the folks like Ruth Bader Ginsburg or various female leaders, various African female leaders, Mandela and others. From an inclusion and diversity standpoint, there are so many points in time that led us to where we are right now. I have the opportunity to do the Black Founders because of the foundation of the women and the African American and African people who came behind me or came before me. And now the opportunity is, how do I create that stair step so the future leaders can take that and take that forward? I think the one thing that I've learned is, don't do it like me. Do it like who you are. Be authentic to you, but take the platform and drive that forward. So truly, it's how do I create something that hopefully spurs and inspires people with ideas to be able to create their own, to take that to the next step. I don't think you guys need it. You're already on this entrepreneurial kick and you're moving forward and you're thinking about, how do I grow my business and things like that. So long as part of that is, how do I make sure that this isn't all just about money? It's also about, how do I create jobs? How do I change my community? Changing my community, my family, et cetera, has ripple effects. And that's the stewardship that I think that would be fantastic if we can drive that forward.
That's really great. Awesome. I think you're speaking about impact, which should be in everyone's mind, no matter what they're doing. So I guess this is the end, Joy. I think 48 minutes in. Thank you so much for making time out of your morning. And it's evening for us. You're first guest of the year, so I guess that's a good sign.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, Joy, do you have anything else to say?
I would just like to thank Kathryn for making time. I have learned so much today, but one thing that spoke to me and that actually encouraged us to, me and hopefully everybody else to keep on doing, what we are doing is the statement you said that if you can articulate the size of the problem, you can also articulate the size of the solution. So I think that's a very great challenge for us to just keep on innovating, because I'm sure we have the ideas and the solutions as well. So thank you so much for making time, Kathryn, and all the audience and the ladies for asking questions. Thank you so much. I cannot end this, however, without mentioning and reminding us that Impact Africa Network is a non-profit startup studio. We are committed to changing the African narrative, and we firmly believe women are critically important in this mission. And thus we are committed to providing women leadership opportunities in the startups we develop. So to support our work, you can join our microdonations program. You can support us for as little as just $30 a month and be part of this exciting movement that is working towards creating a new African future and creating the next innovations. And we hope to come to Accenture with one of those innovations really soon. All right. Thank you so much. That is all we had time for. Have a good day and have a good evening, depending on where you are watching us from.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Goodbye.